All right, everyone. I am going to get started. Hopefully, more people join. But I would like to introduce myself to you all today. My name is Jemmel Billingslea. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Dexter Southfield School in Brookline, Mass. And I'm here to talk about our board and their leadership and how that has opened doors to student leadership. But who are we? Who is Dexter Southfield? Okay, Dexter Southfield, here's our mission statement, right? Helps boys and girls develop their individual talents and build on an ethical foundation for life. Students learn to lead with confidence, serve with compassion, and live by our motto, our best today, better tomorrow. And this is really, really important for everyone to see. I've highlighted a few words or phrases here that mean a lot to our school and to our school community. Individual talents, everyone comes with their own background, with their own experiences, and we want to highlight those talents as well. We want to build an ethical foundation with the understanding of the world that we're going to be sending our students into once they leave our doors. Students are going to learn to lead with confidence, understanding what it means to be a leader, how to showcase leadership. We'll be talking about that today. Serve with compassion, okay, being selfless for others and those around you, and to live by our motto. We do not at all want to ever be complacent. And here at Dexter Southfield, we are not a complacent school. We always want to continue to improve and get better and better each day. And that's a challenge that we have not only as faculty and staff, but we provide that with our students as well. So here are some of the pillars that we have at Dexter Southfield: character, confidence, compassion. Okay, and we have multiple ways that you're going to hear during this presentation in which we sort of hit on all three of these pillars. So we have three divisions in our school. We have our lower school, which is our pre-K through 5. We have middle school, which is grades 6 through 8, and our upper school, which are grades 9 through 12. And you can see here that we start with a single sex structure in the lower school. And then as we start to transition students into the middle school, they still have a single sex program, but we start to actually transition them into co-educational classes. And then when we finally get into the upper school, 99% of our classes in the upper school are co-ed. So what are the themes that you're going to be hearing from me today? All right, you're going to hear a lot about student leadership. You're going to hear how the board has been involved in this student leadership. Hopefully you hear some new and fresh ideas about what leadership actually is and what student leadership is and how we define it for our school. And then also identify and analyze some of the challenges that maybe your school or your organization faces as well. Every single school, every single organization has those challenges. Are you able to, one, identify them? And then B, or two, are you able to actually analyze what those challenges are so you can come up with healthy solutions? So where were we a year ago in our programming in regards to student leadership, as well as our diversity, equity, and inclusion? Okay, so our lower school and our pre-K through 5, we started by putting new books into the classrooms for students to pick up and read, and we wanted to create more windows and mirrors for students. We have constantly reviewed our curriculum in the humanities department, and we started celebrating and educating students in the lower school on various cultural and religious holidays, and our faculty also went through professional development. What does professional development mean, and how is it impactful, and then how does that lead to student leadership? You're going to hopefully hear some of those answers from me later in this presentation as well. The middle school, okay? So again, reviewing the curriculum specifically in history in our English and reading arts programs, okay? By implementing more books into the curriculum to create those windows and mirrors for all of our students, particularly in our English classes, was something that we felt we needed to do, and it was necessary to do based off of the way that the world is constantly changing around us today. We have revamped what we call, or we had a revamped diversity day. I'm sure some of your schools probably have this as well. And with the middle school also, we continue to celebrate and educate students on the various cultural and religious holidays. Now, what does that actually mean? We really wanted to educate them on why we celebrate what we celebrate, but also give them an idea of the cultural significance that these holidays have for other individuals. So, one example that I like to give to everyone that I speak to about this is we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month here at Dexter Southfield. Some of the students may not know why it is important to celebrate such a day, or they don't know how to celebrate the day. And we really wanted to hit these events with the education, teaching them about what this all means, why it is important, when did it originate, where did it come from, but also providing them with the opportunity to actually celebrate some of this culture as well. So we have a annual salsa night, which is something that we had not previously done, but that has now been a hit at our school. We also celebrate the Day of the Dead, and students in both the middle school and the upper school actually have to do projects for this as well. And those are just two examples that I would like to sort of highlight about what we do in terms of celebrating and educating students on cultural and religious holidays. You're going to hear how some of this has actually changed as we go on with the presentation as well. We also implemented a guest speaker series for our students. So every student in the middle school got to hear a speaker talk about what it means to be a leader. We've had a former state trooper come in, we've had former college athletes come in and speak to all of the students as well. And then professional development. What does that mean? What does that look like? And why do we do it? So at our school, we have actually gone through DEI professional development for the last 4 to 5 years. I say 4 to 5 because this is my fourth year at the school. And that's something that shows why this is important to us. But more importantly, we want to continue to enhance the skills of our faculty as they continue to teach our students. And we also have faculty and students that are engaged and attend the regional conferences and the national conferences as well. So we get to our upper school and we have diversified our elective offerings for the students to select. And students can choose to take a semester course or they can take a year-long course, which are still electives, in which case we have actually implemented more cultural aspects into the curriculum. We have a history of social justice class. That's one example. We have women in history as well. I won't go through all of our electives, but that's something that we know or we knew a year ago was important for all of our students on our campus. We had affinity groups for our students. You'll hear more about affinity groups a little bit later. Again, the upper school students and faculty also attend the national and regional conferences, and these are diversity conferences as well. We have also continued to celebrate and educate, you've heard that already, our students on cultural and religious holidays. The upper school students also were a part of the guest speaker series where they also heard, all of the upper school students heard what a guest speaker had to say. And those topics range from diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as leadership, which is what we're here to talk about today as well. Our faculty have gone through professional development, and then we actually revamped again the diversity day for our upper school students. So as we transition from a year ago today, we start to look at sort of what happened over the last spring and summer this past year. So as everyone is well aware, COVID happened this past spring, and it really threw the entire world for a loop. But all of our students and faculty had to go remote. There was a huge fear of the unknown, right? Not knowing what was going to take place or when we would be back. All right, and then we had to really analyze if there was any lack of access for any of our students and our families as well. So being that we were all remote, we wanted to ensure that everyone had access to the technology that they needed. All of the students and families felt supported throughout this process. And lastly, we wanted to make sure that we kept our BIPOC students engaged and supported. So For those of you who don't know the term BIPOC, it is Black, Indigenous People of Color. And we wanted to really target those families to ensure that they felt supported throughout that entire process. As you start to transition a little bit into the summer, there was a lot that went on from a civility standpoint, okay? We all saw various killings and injustices on camera. There were protests throughout the nation. There was the emergence of all of the Black at social media pages where students were able to share their experiences at predominantly white institutions. And then there were students and faculty that needed support to basically digest what just went on, right? What do we just see on our phones or on our cameras or on our laptops, wherever it may have been? What do we do with what we just saw? How do we become more active with this? And more importantly, how do we make ourselves feel good knowing that there was a situation that just took place that was actually horrific and terrifying? And that's something that we also had to deal with as an institution as well, to engage our students and our faculty and support them through that time also. And then lastly, how do we support specifically BIPOC students, and knowing that these Black at social media pages have come up, where have we, Dexter Southfield, come up short? Where did we sort of forget to check in on all of our students? And that's really where we start to dive into our board of trustees and some of the impact that they had on all of this that has occurred. So, our board of trustees heard what was going on. They were able to see what was also going on. And they created an ad hoc committee, right, dedicated to improving DEI efforts. Now, what does that mean? Okay. And I'm going to dive into some of that again as well. But they created subcommittees off of that one committee to address all aspects, or as many aspects of our institution as we possibly could. So, because of this ad hoc committee, okay, we started to meet with our families, our students, and our alumni throughout the entire summer. So, that meant our head of school, that meant myself, it meant the assistant head of school, it meant members of the board, all had opportunities to meet with various stakeholders on campus. And if they weren't able to be on campus in one on one settings, we would do phone calls, we would do some Zoom calls, whatever we had to do to make sure that we actually checked in with all of our stakeholders is something that we did. And the board was influential in that process the entire time. And because of that, we also knew, well, there's a little bit of help that we know we are going to need. How do we get that help? What are we looking for in help, et cetera, et cetera? So we hired Lawrence Alexander of Carney Sandoe. I'll talk more about that later as well, to help us address many of the issues that we heard from these conversations with students, with families, and with our alumni as well. After we hired Lawrence, we started to analyze our current school climate. Well, what do we think about the school? What do our students think about the school? What do our families think about the school? What do other schools think about our school as well? But this all, in my opinion, and I fully believe this all started to show a dedication to improving our student experience. So why are we here each and every single day at Dexter Southfield? We're here for the kids. We want to ensure that our kids are improving and are having the greatest experience as possible. And we connect everything back to our mission, as you saw earlier in the presentation. That is what we live by, and that is what the board lives by as well. And that is how they have shown their dedication by making sure that with whatever we do, we always direct it back to what is our mission? Why are we here each and every day? And then we have our return to campus back in August. Okay, so we decided to conduct research on student leadership. Now, again, we need to define, and we're going to have the opportunity at the end of the presentation to sort of go through that. We need to define what student leadership means at each institution, right? What does it mean at Dexter Southfield? What does it mean at any other private school or public school, rather, as well? All right, we wanted to identify and analyze the student leadership over the past 5 years. We reviewed our KPIs for our BIPOC students in particular, and we continued our professional development over the summer. We continued to address feedback from the conversations that we had over the summer. And then we wanted to really address student leadership across all three divisions within our school. Okay. That was something that we did over the summer and into our school year. So, board involvement. What does the board have to do with anything you just said besides creating this committee? Okay. So, our board involvement, the ad hoc committee met on a weekly basis to analyze the school climate. And analyzing the school climate means sometimes you have to ask hard questions and questions that you may not necessarily want to answer. But that is something that the board was able to do. That was something that I was able to do. And that's something that our families were a part of as well. Our board in particular met with students and their families, okay, to measure whether or not we as an institution are actually living up to our mission. Why are we here every single day? As a student, do you feel like we're actually getting you to where you need to be from an ethical standpoint and from a leadership standpoint? And from these meetings that we had on the board, we were able to develop strategies to implement programming for student success. All right. So again, some of the committees that were created were our hiring. We've changed some of our language in our hiring. We've done some more with our curriculum and updated some of our curriculum, right? We've worked with our communications department and we've started to address everything that we've heard from students in regard to student life. And more importantly, we've learned from past mistakes, okay? The things that you did not do or the things that you did not do well, we wanted to make sure that we addressed that, and the board, right? They took that and they said, okay, let's make sure that we address that. And how are we going to address it moving forward? So we researched our current student leaders, right? Students that win awards, our captains of all of our varsity athletics, our student government team, as well as all of our affinity group leaders also. And with all of this, right, and with doing this research with a lot of our student leaders, we were able to see, well, what are some of the hidden costs that are here at Dexter Southfield, right? You have your tuition, you have the bill, but what are some of the things that aren't discussed? What are some of the things that aren't always highlighted? And how can we target those for all of our students? And again, we were able to ask the difficult questions, okay? Some of the questions that, could challenge you morally or ethically to ensure that you are actually living by the mission that you say you are living by. So I'll continue. And here are some of the questions that we did address, okay? What is the current climate? Okay, can we compare some of our past experiences with our present experiences? And this is where the role of our alumni became really, really important. What did our alumni face? What did they experience? And then how can we merge those two experiences or those two caveats together to develop programming to ensure that we are actually delivering everything that we need to deliver? What don't we already know? Okay, and then more importantly, how can someone outside of the organization help? And this is the help that we have received from Lawrence Alexander at Carney Sandoe to really address some of the things that we may have overlooked, right? But also, what role can the consultant play in this process? How do we measure our success? And then lastly, are we guided by our mission? Now, if you look at question number 5, you see ours a little italicized, and I did that because every institution is going to have their own measurement of what success is. And here at Dexter Southfield, we wanted to make sure that we measured our success for our student population on a daily basis. And I have this flow chart, as you can see here, right? With the board, they analyzed the school climate, met with stakeholders, identified some challenges, created measurables, asked for help, connect everything to the mission, and then implement all of the changes that we want to put in place. I'm going to pause right now. Does anyone at all have any questions before I continue. You can use the raise your hand feature, or you can write in the chat. If not, I will continue to present. Okay, I will continue. All right, so then we get into this school year, okay? Again, asking for help, all right? We've hired, oh, there are some questions, excuse me. Okay, so I will, other than electives, has your curriculum been reviewed in other subjects? Yes, our curriculum has been reviewed in other subjects as well. We've reviewed our math curriculum, our science curriculum as well. We've tried to make sure that all of our faculty at one point or another have actually met with either myself or even with Lawrence Alexander to ask how can we actually implement some more DEI initiatives into all of these classrooms. I'm getting a lot of questions, and this is great. Thank you. The next question that I have, what if your board is indifferent or does not want to pursue this? Then I would say if your board does not want to do this or they are indifferent, I would ask the question again, how does all of this connect to your mission statement? Are you living by your mission statement? Is this something that you specifically say you need to do or you are doing in your mission that you can direct it to the board and then have them answer that question as well? And that was hard even for some of our board members to ask, are we living by what we say we are living by? And we had to go through those tough questions as well. What do you do if your constituents do not identify officially as BIPOC? And we live in a virtual world. How do you manage to engage in terms of COVID? Yes, so we do have some students that do not identify as BIPOC. I'm going to save the rest of the answer to that question because some of that is going to be revealed a little bit in the presentation. And I want to make sure that we actually have time to talk about it, but also to get through it as well. Thank you for all of these questions. So I am going to continue, but I will address a lot of that in the rest of this presentation also. Okay. So again, asking for help with Lawrence Alexander, and then we targeted our current families and students. But then our board said, well, if there's assistance that kids and families need, we need to make sure that we provide them with whatever it is that they need, with whatever funding it is that they need. So I know in particular, I have actually been able to spend an additional $5,000 just on student needs, right? The hidden cost of what it takes to attend Dexter Southfield, okay? And then expand on the current programming. So outside of the curriculum, we have, and you'll see this in our presentation as well, we have turned our diversity day into what is now diversity week. We have also created a task force with 10% of our upper school students are a part of this diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and justice task force as well. And that was something that was created, I wouldn't say on the fly, but it was not planned going into the school year. But to have 10% of our student population in grades 9 through 12, actively participate and choose to participate, I think that shows that goes a long way. Now, part of this, it's a leadership training program task force. You have to fund that, right? There's funding that is necessary for that. And our board was not hesitant, even in the slightest, to put forward some of that funding to ensure that these students can have this program. Lastly, prioritize goals. So ensure all students have access to all of your programming, okay? So if you have prom and prom tickets are, let's just say $150 and a family can't afford that, is that an equitable program that you have on your campus? Create leadership opportunities for students, okay? And you're gonna see some more about that in a second. Continue professional development. We have 3 divisions here at Dexter Southfield, all with one goal. And that goal goes right back to our mission statement. And then lastly, we have all of our faculty and our staff met or will meet or have already met with our consultant to address DEI initiatives. And I'm going to pause once again to ask if there are any other questions, and you can write those in the chat before I continue. Okay, I will continue. So where are we now? Okay, what has changed since our board, who have met on a weekly basis and have decided that this is work that is important to them and important for our school? Where has that gotten us? So in our lower school, our pre-K through 5, our history curriculum is currently under review with some changes that are going to be expected moving into the 2021-2022 school year. We've replaced our diversity day with diversity week in the lower, all three divisions, but particularly in the lower school as well. We have created a parent affinity group. That's not something that we have had here at Dexter Southfield. And some of the feedback that we got from our families is they didn't always feel connected to campus. They didn't always feel like this was their campus. They didn't always feel like they could speak up about whatever issues they wanted to raise for various reasons. The board heard that feedback and said, well, this is a space that we know we need to create for our families, particularly parents of color and parents of students of color who don't always feel like they have that space on campus. This is something that we know that they need. So we're going to create this, we're going to implement it, and we're going to do it again by our mission, because this is what we need for all of our families to feel like this is their place as well. The faculty in the lower school also attend, regional and national conferences as well. That's something that happened this year. That was not always the case for various reasons, whether it was timing or whatever the case may be. But with everything being virtual this year, we actually were able to have more faculty participate than we have in years past. And then we have more parent involvement for our historical and religious celebrations. We have parents and we have families that come from various backgrounds, and they want to be represented here on our campus. What better way than to have them play a role in whatever it is we decide to put on in a celebration or an acknowledgement of these religious and or historical holidays. When we get to our middle school is in the process right now of actually creating affinity groups for middle school kids, which is something that we also have not had at our school. Now, why is that important? Because we also had middle school students that have had their own experience. Some are now in the upper school, some have actually graduated, but it doesn't change the perspective in terms of this is something that was a need, this is something that was important to students, and if it's important to students, it's important to faculty, and it's important to our board as well. We've also changed from Diversity Day to Diversity Week. We're actually in our planning stages of that right now. In our middle school also, we have multiple languages that are taught year round to students. And when I say year round, I mean, it's broken up in a month. So for 3 months, they'll take Spanish, 3 months, they'll take Latin, 3 months, they'll take French, for instance. And that really just gives them an opportunity to, one, learn multiple languages and get their feet wet with each one. But also within those languages, you learn more about the cultures of the language, of the places that utilize this language. So for instance, when I talked about celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, knowing that we have Spanish classes, well, what countries, right, actually celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month? And more importantly, where did this holiday even come from? When did this celebration become a thing? Our students are able to learn that in the classroom as well. We've increased our faculty who attend professional development as well. Again, because this is a COVID year, that also helps. But we've also gained more interest from our faculty who want to attend. We have the creation of the parent affinity group also. And then we've also addressed hiring to create more windows and mirrors. Again, our best today, better tomorrow. So where we were a year ago, that was great. Where we are now, that's also great, but we also know we want to continue to expand. We want to continue to get better. And we never, ever, ever want to become complacent in where we are. And then we get to our upper school, and we have our affinity groups that have not only expanded in terms of size, but we also have a new affinity group this year created by students. Please forgive me because I don't speak Hebrew, but it is Hallelujah was the name that the students decided to create, and it is their affinity group for those students who identify with the Jewish religion. Um, they put on this affinity group because they felt like it was a need for them. Again, we have the creation of our parent affinity group. We've reverted from from diversity day to diversity week. And then we've created this diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and justice task force that again has 10% of our upper school population. And one of the questions that I had here in the chat, if I can just pull that up again, is we live in a virtual world. How do you manage to engage? So with this task force, we do have students that have chosen to go remote, and we keep them engaged by utilizing Microsoft Teams or even Zoom. So we have the ability now to ensure that even if you aren't here on campus, you're still able to actually be a part of all of the programming that we have. That's in the classroom, but it's also within a lot of our affinity groups. So this DEIAJ task force, they are actually taking the lead this year on Black History Month. Students are taking the lead on that, and not just BIPOC students. And they're also part of the planning for Diversity Week. Again, students taking leadership over the programming that we are putting on here as well. And then, are there faculty affinity groups? There are not yet faculty affinity groups, but that is something that I'm in conversation with Lawrence Alexander, our consultant, to ensure that we can put that on and have for our faculty as well. Another change that we have here at Dexter Southfield is students are actually taking the lead on these cultural and or historic holidays. So one example that I'll give to you all is Diwali, okay? The Festival of Lights. Now, it was very, very subtle what we did this year, but it was a student who had the idea. A lot of people don't know what this is in our community. A lot of people have never experienced this. So let's actually do something where we can educate all our faculty, our students, but also we can still celebrate it. So one thing that we did in the upper schools, we actually put little tea lights, small little tea lights in front of each of the classrooms, and they were actually lit during Diwali as well. And then the student actually created an entire display of what is Diwali, what does it represent, who celebrates it, and then he actually printed out all of the prayers that he and his family, because they celebrate this holiday, he printed out all of the prayers that they say, and then we put those up in display for students and faculty to come to this display and they can learn more about it. And then we actually got our dining hall in on this as well, and they actually implemented a few food items for Diwali, as well as they've done it for Hispanic Heritage Month and so on and so forth. But again, that's all student leadership, and students are taking the role of actually doing this versus it always being faculty and or staff. We also have leadership training for all of our varsity team captains. And with that, okay, basically we sit down with all of them. Myself, this year we'll also have our consultant, and we're actually going to we're going to discuss what is leadership, what does it mean to be the leader of a team, and then how does that leadership actually help you off of the playing field. So when you're around campus, when you're walking around, when you're in those art classes, when you're on the stage performing, how does that leadership come into play? And what does it mean to have that leadership? You see here, I have revamped our Diversity Day again. So while we are moving to Diversity Week, the reason why I put that it is revamped, because this year it is literally going to be all student led. Students are going to lead our Diversity Week this year. And then in the spring this year, we actually have our own conference that we're putting on with two other institutions, and it is the Inclusion Illusion Lessons Learned from 2020. And again, this is a student-led conference. So the adults, myself, and a few others, we're helping in terms of the logistics of where things are going to be and the timing, but all of the workshops, all of the training, that's all student-led. Members of our DEIAJ task force are going through a lot of that leadership training as well. So 2 weeks ago, we actually had 37 students on a call with Dr. Liza Toulousan, who's a diversity consultant, who had them go through courageous conversations training. And what does it mean to have a difficult conversation? Again, that takes funding, which the board was influential in providing to all of us to be able to put that on. I'm going to pause and ask, are there any other questions that anyone may have that I can address? I'll keep checking in on the chat as we continue to move along. So what have we learned over this past year at Dexter Southfield? What do we get out of this? So again, student leadership is mission guided. If you are not abiding by your mission, then that is something that all institutions, schools, whatever it may be, organizations need to address. Then we prioritize spending for student programming. Now, that does not mean you need to break the bank. A lot of the student programs that we actually put on at Dexter Southfield either have no cost or the cost is little. Those larger events, yes, there is a cost to that, but are we committed to putting those on? And then again, what is the reasoning behind that? Are we doing it just to do it, to say we did it? Are we checking a box? Or are we doing it because we actually care about the development of our students? We've also learned that we need to continue to assess where we are, again, we, Dexter Southfield, in regard to student leadership. So again, addressing awards, addressing team captains, addressing our affinity groups, addressing our club leaders, addressing student government as well. What we have also learned is that our board of trustees were committed to improving our DEI initiatives and identifying the areas of improvement, creating more leadership opportunities for students, and then trusting the process. They were committed to the process. This work, right, whether it's DEI or whether it's student leadership, it doesn't just happen in a day. It doesn't just happen overnight. It doesn't just happen in a month. For us, and what we have found is that this is a year-long continuous process that we are committed to. And you must be committed to the process in order to improve the areas of the school that you're looking to improve. And in this case, for us, it was our DEI, but it was also our student leadership together. We've also learned that we aren't done, right? Like I just said. So leadership takes time, and we're committed to developing leaders. So that training that I just mentioned that those students were on, that was a Sunday training that they did not have to go to, but they decided that that's what they wanted to do. I know our board members they're also attending their own professional development. Excuse me, our consultant, Lawrence Alexander, he has met with all pieces of our school. So he's met with administrators. He's met with the college counseling office. He's met with the school nurses. He's met with our arts program. He's met with athletics. He's met with all three division heads. And then he's also met with departments of each division as well, right? That takes time. So leadership is something that takes time. Professional development is something that takes time as well. We've also learned that we're all in this together, right? During specifically this crazy, crazy year, it's going to take everyone involved with our school. So all of our stakeholders, that's families, that's the board, that's the administration, that's faculty, that's staff, that's outside staff in certain cases as well. We're all in this together in order to improve our institution and to improve our school. And lastly, we will continue to ask the hard questions. Again, we as an institution don't want to be complacent. We don't ever want to settle. We never want to say that we're done doing or completing or going through this process, right? It's always changing, it's always evolving, and it's always something that we are committed to. And we have to show that commitment. And I think this past year in particular, right, we've had board members, again, talk and discuss with families, but then also provide the support, whether that's financial, right? Or whether that's just being present, whether that's in a meeting or even sometimes on campus as well. Okay. So that is what we have learned. That is where we are currently at Dexter Southfield. Now, I have left thank you all, but I have left the last 15 minutes of my presentation to really dive into some of the questions that have been asked. So I'll go back and try to hit on some of them again, but I really want to talk about what do you do if your constituents don't identify officially as BIPOC? I'll talk about that piece first. I think that what we have done is we ensure that we're creating allies within our institution. So while you may not be or identify as a BIPOC individual, there are still issues within the world that still affect you and your place in it. And we make sure that we teach that to our kids as well. Now, that's hard sometimes for kids to hear, or even sometimes adults to hear. But because it's hard doesn't mean that you don't have the conversation. And right now, we are having that conversation. I think that's my best way to address that. And then finally, we live in a virtual world. How do you manage to engage? So we don't let that stop us. Our school has actually been in person since the beginning of the school year, but we have had multiple students and or families that have chosen to go remote. Well, you being remote does not mean that you are not a member of this campus. And we want to ensure and make sure that we have everyone a part of this campus. So we schedule Microsoft Team meetings, we schedule our Zoom meetings. And I think those are all right, what everyone is doing right now. So what separates Dexter Southfield in that regard is that we always look on different ways that we can be creative with our engagement. So if that is via social media, if that is sometimes maybe even just picking up the phone and having a conversation, we've actually not updated, but we added some of our technology. In our classrooms, we have the OWL cameras, where if you are remote, whether that's during an affinity group meeting or even during a class, you're actually able to be projected onto the screen as if you were actually in the room with all of your classmates as well. So being that it's a COVID year, it does pose its own challenges. But again, we're committed to trying to get better. So regardless of how hard or how difficult the challenges may be, we at Dexter Southfield think about ways that we can combat those challenges and meet them head on. At this time, are there any other questions that I'm able to answer or address from anyone? You can put them in the chat or you can, thank you. How have the DEI initiatives affected the college counseling curriculum for the upper school? That is a great question. So the ways that it has affected our college counseling curriculum is really asking them to think about, is their messaging equal or equitable, right, to all of the students that they work with? And then also, are all of the students actually given the same opportunities to be set up for success in regards to college counseling? Now, what does that mean? Do you have access to test prep? And if you do have access to test prep, is it equitable? Is there a cost? Are you meeting that cost? Are you not meeting that cost? And what are you going to do to sort of address that? College visits, right? College visits definitely are time consuming. And sometimes they're further away and you may not be able to get to a school. I can tell you right now, I worked directly with the college counseling office this year and was able to take 2 students on a college visit. And one of those students actually committed to the college right after we got onto the campus, right? And what does that have to do with DEI initiatives? This was a BIPOC individual who came from a low income family and was not able to actually get to that college. And had he not gone to see that college, chances are he probably wouldn't have committed there. But we wanted to create a way, an opportunity for him to do that. So again, this goes down to funding. Thank you. This goes down to funding, right? And if you have that funding provided to you, the options are definitely limitless. And we have a question from someone with their hand raised. Abiel, did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, Abiel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering about your mission You mentioned it many times, and it's something that, I mean, we all know that is very important. But I was wondering if you can think of practices or elements of your school that had been changed after reflecting on how you're living up to the mission. Have there been things that have been changed because of that reflection?
Definitely. So I think the biggest thing that has been changed within our institution was actually our ethics course that we have for our ninth graders. And really what we wanted to do with that ethics course, so that's actually the only class in our upper school that is still single sex for various reasons. But what we really wanted to do was revamp that course and actually teach them, okay, well, what does it mean to actually live an ethical life, and how do we actually provide our kids with that ethical foundation? Now, because we had changed some of the curriculum in the ethics course, it actually got us thinking, well, what if we started this sooner? What if we started this now maybe in our middle school? Well, if we can start it in middle school, what if we actually start that in our pre-K through 5? Obviously you have to keep the topics age appropriate, but it's something that we're still implementing this as well, but that has been one of the changes, particularly our ethics course. Thank you for that question.
How long have you been at Dexter Southfield?
Yeah, so I've been at Dexter Southfield now for 4 years, and I've been in this role as the DEI director now for 3 years. And in that 3 years, I can say they have definitely allowed me to be me. And I get to be who I am every single day unapologetically. And I love that about our school. And with the programming as well, I'm a very big thinker. I like to do things a little differently. And they provide me with the platform and the opportunity to do so, but also challenge me, right, to continue to grow as a professional.
I wanted to know what type of evaluation mechanisms have been effective in portraying the strengths and growth of the programs with a direction of where, you know, strategically you want things to go in the future, and the supports and the direction in coordination with administrative leadership.
Definitely. So I guess the best way for me to answer that question would be, there was no one form, right, of evals that we did. We haven't sent out any surveys or anything of that nature. What we did is we actually got firsthand accounts, right, from the current families and students, as well as our alums. And based off of those conversations, we were able to sit collectively together on this ad hoc committee and think about, well, where do we want to be in 6 months? Where do we want to be in a year? And then we started to create some goals. So one of our goals was to actually, one, revamp our diversity days into diversity week, excuse me, create affinity groups for families because that didn't exist prior, and then also improve student life on campus. Now, what does that mean? How do you measure student life? And I think for us, one way that we have started to really measure that is really about, you know, you could go around and look at all of the kids, but we have weekly check-ins together, but also our head of school actually has weekly check-ins with students as well, to really hear about their experience and what they're going through, and then ways of improvement. And then he relays that to the board of trustees, and then we all come back together collectively and discuss it in these ad hoc meetings. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, that's very interesting that a lot of it, the structures that you have for communication drive the feedback loops.
Definitely, definitely. Our school is very, very big on communication. Sometimes I feel like we communicate too much, but we definitely try to make sure that we're getting that firsthand account from individuals in real time, for sure.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for that, because I think the issue of reporting is a really interesting style mechanism And sometimes when you have changes in administrators, what people need to understand what has been developed and what is effective, it does depend on the communication links and the trust that have been done. But I also think it's interesting to see whether students and parents then perceive that the meaning of their involvement is being preserved for the future, and that they know that that's valued.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just said it right there. We want them, more importantly, we want our families and students to feel valued at the end of the day. And I think with everything that went on last summer, really spring into the summer, we were all able to see that students from various PWIs did not feel valued. They didn't feel like that was their school or their institution or their organization. And what we here at Dexter Southfield really think about and what we have said is that's just a benchmark and a reminder for us of what we need to improve on moving forward. And it's going to hold us accountable moving forward. So if we ever have another student that says, I felt like the school didn't care about me while I was there, or they only cared about my athletics or whatever it may be, we really want to try to change that narrative and let them know, like, no, we care about you as a person. We care about your family. We care about your success.